Hey everyone, I am planning to shut down my Reef aquarium. This is the aquarium I'm thinking of shutting down. This aquarium is about 3.5 years old. It has quite a history and a lot of peculiarities about it, and we're going to talk about it today. I'll give you some really interesting facts about the history of this tank, and then I'll explain my reasoning for why I'm thinking of shutting it down. So first and foremost, this particular tank is an experimental tank. I've used it to run an experiment on the lighting and how the lighting spectrums affect the corals. So you may remember back in the day I had bigger tanks, and when I've kind of downsized, I've had a fair bit of frags left, and I've also borrowed a few from some of my friends, reefer friends here in Toronto. And what I did was I've set up these 3 radian lights in running 3 different spectrums. So basically the one on my left, the closest one, has been running only actually full spectrum. So basically every single channel was at 100, and then I've just corrected the overall brightness to be, I think, around 22% at the time. And the reason is this is a very powerful set of lights. I did have the egg crate running kind of halfway, so basically it was about 10 inches from the bottom. So actually a little step back. This tank is Sephora 80 gallon. It's 24 by 48 inches dimensions, and then I think it's about 16 inches high. So it's half-inch glass, and I had all of it right in the middle. I had an egg crate running. I've set it up kind of so that it's in the middle of the water column. There's enough water underneath. There's enough water on the top, and then I've actually taken 3 sets of frags. I actually had 6 frags of each acropora. There were about, I would say, 10 different species. Probably 6 or 7 of them were acropora. There were a couple of montes, and I think a bird's nest. But basically, all these species of corals, I had 6 of each, and I basically had 2 identical frags, and everything, by the way, came from the same colonies. So basically, they were all identical corals. I've had them set up so there's 2 of the same acro under this light, 2 under this light, and 2 under this light. And then I had them basically positioned in exactly the same spot. I actually used a par meter to make sure that the par was identical in relationship to the puck, because obviously there's a little bit of a spotlight / volcano effect where you have the most light right underneath the puck, and then if you steer away even I would say 8 inches or 6 inches, the par would drop. And I mean, one of the reasons here is that there's not a lot of space between the actual light and the coral. I mean, in a bigger tank, if it's deeper, the spread is going to be much better. But in this particular case, I've measured it, and I was running with a par of 220. So basically, that's a sweet spot for most acros, where you're not going to get crazy colors, but you're also not going to get anything bad. And what I've done is I've set this up so that the one closest to me was running at a full spectrum. The one in the middle was running the AB+, which is, if I'm not mistaken, you got the 4 blue channels all at 100%, and then AB, sorry, the whites, the yellow, the green, and red are at 24%. And then the third one down was only blues. So I was running the royal blue, the blue, and the 2 ultraviolet and violet, but the rest of the channels were at 0. So I've been running this on a daily basis for about 8 hours, maybe 9 hours, with about half an hour where basically I would lower the intensity of the light and get it to the same half an hour period where I could observe each coral and take photos and kind of compare them. So you could say that there was a little bit of other colors mixed in for that half an hour, but even then this half an hour was actually a little bit shorter than that because it took some time to get to that point and then kind of go back to the channel. And another thing I did correct for the intensity. So basically I used a par meter, and I've made sure that, for example, if the blue only light was running at 40%, then the full spectrum was running at around 22% adjusted. So basically the 22% of the full spectrum was in par equal to 40% of blues only. And AB was kind of in the middle. I think it was around 30% intensity or overall brightness. So I've set this up. I've put all the corals in there, and then I ran it for about, I would say, 4 or 5 months. And I've learned a lot. And then I ran this tank for over a month under just the same blue light. So basically I made sure everybody, everything was the same and uniform, and there were no changes. And then the first night when I turned on the 3 different channels that were intensity adjusted and whatnot, I had a friend who is another reefer with more experience than mine come over, and he basically, I show him the experiment and I show him the 3 lights, and he's looking at it, and he goes clearly, oh, that acro looks so much better under, let's say, the blue light than under the full spectrum, bar none. Clearly there's something going on. So he went to this on the first day when I switched the lights, but he didn't know that. And funny enough, that's exactly what it looked like. So like if you are coming to somebody else's aquarium and you see a particular acro under their particular lighting, it may look a lot better than yours, and you're thinking, oh man, am I doing something wrong? Have I am I using the wrong salt, or have I not done the right type of spectrum? So you run back and you start tinkering with something, trying to get that color. And that's exactly what he saw. But then I switched all the colors to the same color, and he saw that the same coral looked identical, in all 3, which was expected. But your eyes just fool you. So basically, because the fluorescence and pigmentation, and it gets ignited by a particular color spectrum, the corals immediately start to look healthier, better, more vibrant under the different lighting. But in reality, it's the same coral. So that already taught me something. Where a lot of times I would, I would go to somebody else's house, or I'd go to the store and I pick something and I'm thinking, oh, it's going to look great on my tank. I bring it over and then it doesn't look as good. And then I'm starting to tinker with parameters and I'm thinking, oh, what am I doing wrong? So then I ran this whole experiment for about 4 months, and towards the end of it, I was observing, or I was trying to look for a whole bunch of different changes. I wasn't really measuring for the growth or difference, or the size really, and because it would be very hard to measure how the frags would grow in such a short period of time, and I didn't want to bother with weighing them. But what I was trying to also see is, would I see any more algae under, let's say, the full spectrum, because it's got the red light versus only blue, because another thing that I would hear from a lot of reefers is that turn just the blues on, and then you're not going to have the algae because you're going to starve your algae, and it needs the red light to really grow. So towards the end of the experiment, I looked at every single coral, and to my surprise, I did not see any difference at all. Basically, the corals did not change color, they did not change pigmentation or anything really observable in 4 months, running 3 completely different spectrums. So to me, all of that means is that as long as you have the blues, and I haven't done the experiment where I did not have the blue channels on. So basically, if you are running radiance, or let's say hydras, which was a very similar experience for me, and then you run it under with all blue channels, at a good level, the rest of the lighting is really only for aesthetics, so something that you like the most. Right now, the tank, for example, this is the closest to AB+, and let's say I like it, so I'm going to be running it this way. But to somebody else, they like a much bluer look or a much more natural, sunlit look. In any cases, even when you are visiting somebody and you see that the coral looks, more brown or more yellow or whatnot, that's really only temporal change of the pigmentation, basically how it ignites and reflects the light versus the actual change of the pigmentation of the coral. At least in those 4 months when I did it, this is what I've observed, and this is what I've done. So I thought I would share that with everyone, and basically this is what I've learned. Let me know if your experience was different, or maybe you can call me out on something that I haven't done. Like I said, this is not super scientific, but this is something that I definitely enjoyed doing, and I very much changed the way I configure and my color spectrum. Because again, and a little side note, everybody knows, or many of you know, that I'm the ambassador for aqua illumination hydras. And you can see my schedule posted on Aqua Illumination website. But I get the email all the time from different users and YouTubers, basically asking me, hey, can you share your particular spectrum? And of course I do, and sometimes I tweak it. But what I was going to say is that as long as you have the blues on, the rest of it doesn't matter as much. So, before, when the LEDs were new, I think we were very scared. But now, and we would tinker things, and it was hard to find that kind of sweet spot. But I think now things have changed quite a bit. So that's my experiment with Radiance G4s. Now, that took about a year all in to set up the tank, to wait until parameters have stabilized and we're ready for acros, and then to run everything and conduct the experiment. But then I've changed this tank to be my grow out tank. So basically I've set it up and ran it under kind of the same now spectrum. So basically they're all running the same spectrum. I had the corals and acros in here, and montes, and a whole bunch of other corals, and I was basically doing the fragging and propagation, which is quite an enjoyable experiment. And eventually I figured that I would actually grow, I need more space, so I actually got a second tank, which was an Innovative Marine. I think it's 35-gallon long, and I've plumbed it into the same tank. So basically Now I had probably almost 50% more volume, water volume, or 45%. And again, it was more space for coral, and I was doing more fragging and coral propagation. I ran it for about a year, and I think now it's time for me to throw in the towel. I've given it a lot of thought, but I think that it's very hard to be everywhere. So even though you like something very much, it's sometimes time to kind of dial back. And I have a thriving treasure reef, which you can see is my main tank, and I think I want it to be my only focus. I also have a freshwater tank that I'll do a video on eventually, but I think that's good enough. So basically, I'm throwing in the towel. I think I'm gonna give these corals or sell some of these corals over the next week or two, and then I'll figure out what to do with the fish, and then basically I'll empty it up, and probably will sell the tank and the sump and the other tank, and maybe some of the equipment. So again, if you're interested and you are in Toronto, let me know in the comments or do a PM. You can also see the history of the tank on Aquatic Log. So again, you can go there and check out my tank, and you'll see so the fish that I have and some of the other information. And overall, that's where I'm at. So this is a quite bittersweet moment. I care deeply about this tank, and this was really a dream come true for me to do more coral experiments, more fragging, trying things out. I have the aqua illumination hydras on the main tank, but I'm very partial to radiance, and it's very nice to see the difference between the two lights and maybe take a coral from one aquarium and put it into another. But the truth of the matter is it's just taking too much of my time, and I gotta focus on other things. So basically, this is probably, this is the first time you see this tank, but it might be also the last time you're gonna see this tank. So I'm figured I'd shoot this video, so at least there is some record of it, and maybe one day I'm gonna look back and reminisce. But having said that, write in the comments below, let me know what you think of my experiment, of the decision, and I'd be curious to read the comments. So thank you for watching this video.